Yeah, I know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker. Welcome to Generations of Grit, a tale of turf and legacy. I want y'all to take a trip with me, y'all. And together we're going to explore this urban landscape where shadows hold secrets and bloodlines intertwine with the streets, right? In this raw and ruthless world, 3 generations of a single family find themselves engulfed in the unforgiving embrace of gang activity. Their story unfolds like an opera, each act laden with violence, power struggles, and a relentless pursuit of dominance in a world where rules are made in blood. Now, this hardened patriarch, he sets the foundation, leaving an indelible mark on the streets, building an empire from the ashes of dreams long extinguished. Now, they called him Elijah Biggs Johnson. He was a towering figure with a cold and unflinching gaze that could pierce the soul. Now, Elijah rose from the ashes of a childhood marred by poverty. He was raised in a dilapidated tenement building in Detroit, where his dwellings reflected his family's desperate financial situation. The walls were peeling, revealing the bones of a structure left to decay. The windows were cracked, where wind blew in all the time, revealing the harsh realities of life. The corridors, they smelled of a pungent blend of dampness and decay that assaulted the senses. Flies were everywhere, buzzing all around relentlessly, their rhythmic dance of hunger echoing the lives of the residents within. And the floors were stained all the time with it was piss and blood and food droppings and bird droppings all over the place. And this mirrored the stains on Elijah's young soul. Now, he was the foundation, and his life became one where he totally wanted to walk away from it. And he did. But before he did, he had to find a home, somewhere to go, because he didn't have anywhere to go and anybody to be with. His mother, Catherine, she worked hard at this factory, but the money that she was making was barely making ends meet. Most of the time, they ate stale bread and watered down soup. His father, Marcus, he was a junkie, caught up in that cycle. He couldn't break it. He was in and out of Elijah's life, disappointing him from one moment to the next. And his cravings for the drug took most of the resources that they had. And it left the family always in a situation of lacking and longing, not ever having enough. So Elijah, he couldn't take it anymore. So one day, as the story goes, he's walking. He's walking in the neighborhood. And there's this guy about the same age as him named Malik. And Malik sees that look on Elijah's face. He recognized that look because it used to be him. Now, Malik had started this organization called the Ravens, and he had recruited with precision individuals that had that same look. So when he saw Elijah, he said, "You look lost." So Elijah looked at him. He said, "I am." He said, "Well, come over here and find yourself." So now Elijah was hesitant at first, but it was something about Malik that pulled him in. He had that charismatic thing about himself. You know those types of people out there that'll pull you to them. Whether they mean good or bad, it's just something about them. And that's what Malik was like. So Elijah went over there. And next thing you know, he was being initiated into the Ravens. Now, because he felt that Malik had threw him a lifeline, he wanted to show him, he wanted to prove to him that he was worthy. His life had just found a purpose. But see, what Elijah didn't know is that Malik was all about the drugs, prostitution, extortion, racketeering, anything that he could force $1 out of somebody else's hand and pocket. But at the end of the day, Elijah was eating. He didn't go to bed hungry at night anymore. His pockets were full of money. People looked at him and feared him. He was cool with that because he thought they respected it, but they feared it. As time goes on, he's growing up. Gang war pops off. Malik gets killed. It's obvious to everybody that Elijah should take his place. So they put him in play. And over the next few years, he reigned with an iron fist. He sent shockwaves throughout the community, throughout the city, going hard on anybody that would dare oppose him. He would not be like Malik. He knew the tricks of the trade, and he determined to impose his will on the whole city. Now, he had a friend named Adrian. Now, Adrian had been knowing him all his life. They grew up together, and he suffered the same fate, growing up in poverty, neglected, everything was going bad. So Elijah pulled him in. And when he pulled him in, he made him his number 2. And they rose together. But see, there was something different about Adrian. And he wanted more. But I'm going to get to that. Not right now. I'm going to get to that later. What I want to do now, I want to get to Jamal. Jamal is Elijah's son. Now, Elijah loved his son. Loved him. And he wanted the best for him. But Jamal was a complicated soul, torn between the legacy of his bloodline and that desire to forge his own path. Now, his father's empire had cast a long, ominous shadow over his dreams. Now, he was both admired and feared for being Elijah's son. And burdened by the weight of expectations and the inevitable pull of the gang lifestyle, he was conflicted in what he should do. So Jamal, he wrestled with his identity, caught between the teachings of the streets and the hopes his mother held for him. Now, she yearned for Jamal to break free from the cycle of violence, to rise above the legacy that had shackled their family. Now, as he became an adolescent and was growing up, Jamal was pulled deeper into the gang's clutches. He became entangled in a web of loyalties, betrayals, and street justice. Now, the code of the gang, it demanded his allegiance, and the streets whispered promises of power and respect. He just had to commit. Now, despite his internal struggles and what he wanted to do back and forth all the way, Jamal rose through the ranks, carving his own path within the criminal empire that had been his father's domain. Now, he earned his tag name. See, a lot of people pick names, but he earned here, they called him Lil J, a title that carried both pride and foreboding. Now, as he grew up, he lived in his father's shadow, but he adapted and adjusted. Now, here we go now, because I told you at the beginning, this is about three people, the single family, all 3 generations, right? Now, here's the 3rd generation. The 3rd generation was Elijah's grandson. It's Jamal's son. His name was Marcus. They called him Youngblood. Now, he stood at the crossroads of destiny. Now, the allure of the gang, they were calling him, echoing the choices of his forefathers. And he was caught up too. But in the midst of this tempest, a glimmer of hope flickered, a chance for redemption, for breaking the chains that bound their family to the unforgiving streets. Now, listen to me now. Because, see, Marcus, he loved school. He loved philosophy. He was in high school now. But when you in the game and when your family's in the game, it ain't no age that is too young, y'all. Ain't no age too young. So Elijah and Jamal, keep up with me now. The time done went on, and both of them were paying for their crimes by serving lengthy sentences and sleepless nights in the penitentiary. Now Elijah, he had been given 50 years in the state and another 480 months in the field. That was about 40 years. Now he accepted that. But at the end of the day, a leader of a gang going to prison is just another address, y'all. Now, Jamal, he received 25 years in the state, another 240 months in the Fed, which that's 20 years in the Fed. And he understood the game too. They embraced the consequences of this lifestyle. But they wanted something different for Marcus. And in their own way, they were hoping and praying that maybe, just maybe, because they were in prison, that this would be enough to turn Marcus the other way. But again, it was all going to be Marcus's choice. It was going to come down to what he wanted to do, because they didn't want to force it on him. But they had to be sure that he made his own choices. They had to be sure. And because the streets had a language all their own, and Marcus was a fast learner, and he became fluent in it. He saw the shadows in his father's eyes, the haunted glances that spoke of the sacrifices, the betrayals, and the scars that ran deep within. Now at school, Marcus, he had to navigate that balance between fitting in and resisting the gravity of gang influence that tugged at him. He witnessed his classmates lured into the enticing promise of the streets, making quick money and purpose, and all of the things that come along with that, status, brotherhood. Yet he knew all too well the toll it would take on a family and a community. He watched it with his own eyes. His classmates had no idea what it was like for him being part of a notorious family. He wished that on no one. The police always outside of the house, the phones being tapped. He wished that on no one. It was a lot to live with, and the strain was evident on his mother's face. She was left to raise a son fighting against an adversary that she couldn't even see or touch. The legacy of his father and grandfather. How do you raise someone in that environment? How do you convince them to avoid and stay away from something that is so powerful, the lure of power and respect? And against all odds, she did her best. Now it was up to Marcus. He had to make a choice. But let me bring in something for you. We finna get to it, y'all. See, in the streets, in the gang lifestyle, revenge is not something that you can escape. Not at all. Now, Elijah and Jamal, they knew that. But Marcus had no idea what was going on with this lifestyle. He had no idea that even though he had nothing to do with the life yet, that he was a target. He was a target. Because see, when the heads of an organization go to prison, it's like it creates a vacuum. And now all of a sudden you got people fighting for supremacy. Who's going to be calling the shots? Even though Elijah and Jamal had left people in charge. Their most trusted lieutenants was running everything, and everything was running smooth. But there were rumblings in the streets, y'all. There were rumblings in the streets. And those rumblings was coming from one person. And that was Little Malik. See, Malik, the founder of the Ravens, had a son. He was about the same age as Jamal. And Little Malik and his mother, they had been pushed to the side after Big Malik had been killed. Now, they were well taken care of. They'd wanted for nothing. But Little Malik wanted the respect of the streets. And the only way he could have the respect of the streets is to be a part of the streets. But he had been pushed to the side. He believed in his heart of hearts that he was the rightful heir to the throne of the Ravens. It was his father's organization, and Elijah had no business running it. And he wanted it back. But in order for him to get it back, he was going to have to do something that was going to get everybody's attention, and it was going to have to be big. It's going to have to be big. So he plotted, planned, and strategized what he was going to do. It had to be a message that would be loud and unmistakable. One that would let everybody know that the disrespect he and his mother had to endure was being avenged in his father's name, and that the rightful heir to the Ravens was here to take what rightfully belonged to him, the throne. But Elijah wasn't playing. Remember when I told you that he had done some things while he was on the streets that sent shockwaves through the whole city? He was known to be brutal. He was known to be no nonsense with anybody that dared oppose him. He was known for that. He relished in that. So when he heard these rumblings of little Malik, it didn't surprise him. He had always wondered if it would happen. So he put out the call to all of his lieutenants. If little Malik makes a move on any territory or any raven, he's to be treated as an enemy of the organization. And ladies and gentlemen, those of you that don't know, that means death to all those that would oppose them. Death, even to little Malik. Yes, even to little Malik. Now, Jamal, he called Marcus because he wanted to discuss this situation with him. He wanted to let him know, look, some things are going on and you need to be aware of. It's serious out there. And you need to be aware of these things. So when he got him on the phone, he was talking to him as if he really understood. So he said, okay, Pops, I'll be careful. But over the next few weeks, nothing happened. It was the calm before the storm. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. Just because it's quiet don't mean it ain't popping off. Traps are being set. Plans are being made. People's lives are being decided without them even knowing it, if they're going to live or die the next day. Yes, that's what's going on. So Elijah, he had to make a call. Get back to Adrian now, y'all. He had to make a call to his most trusted. Even though Adrian had nothing to do with the organization anymore, he was running a community center in the neighborhood trying to make a tone and make amends for all the things that he had done. Elijah knew that he could call on him in a time like this. So when he called him, he told him what was going on and that he was going to need his assistance. And Adrian told him that he got him. He said, I'll do whatever you need me to do to protect your son, your grandson, because he was innocent. And by him being innocent, Adrian felt responsible because he was part of laying the foundation that created this problem. So yes, he was going to do whatever he needed to do to help Elijah. So, as the story goes, I'm just telling you now, as the story goes, they started to plan, plot, and strategize just in the event that little Malik made a move. And if he did make a move, it was going to be a problem. Now, here's the kicker. Elijah, Jamal, and Adrian, they had to figure out who, what, and where. Who, what, and where. And when they figured that out, they figured that they would be able to get ahead of little Malik and figure out what he wanted to do, and then they would be able to act first. But little Malik had heard about a friend that Marcus had at the school, because he had to figure out a way to get to Marcus. And he wouldn't be able to do that just bumping down on him. So he had to get Marcus to come to him. But the only way he could get Marcus to come to him was through somebody else. So when he heard about a friend named Jack, because listen to me, when you got ears on the streets, you find out what you want to find out when you want to find it out. So when he heard that Marcus had a friend named Jack that lived in the old neighborhood, he sent his lieutenants to get him. but it was all a ruse. They weren't going to tell him what was really going on. They were not going to tell him that, but they needed to trick him. They needed to get his help. They needed to do that. So this is what they told him. They told him that, once they got him to the place, because this is how Lil Malik played him. See, you could spot a wannabe from a mile away. And when Lil Malik saw that he was a wannabe, he started to regale him with all kinds of stories of how his father started the Ravens and how he plucked Elijah out of the hands of poverty and put him in a situation where he ended up becoming the head of the organization. When he did all of that, he saw in Jack's face that he had him. So he said, look, I need your help. The Ravens need your help. We want to celebrate the 20th anniversary of when my pops plucked Elijah out of the depths of poverty and made him a Raven. But we can't honor him because he's in prison. We can't do it through Jamal because he's in prison. But his grandson is on the street. Marcus is out here. We want to throw this party and let Marcus be the guest of honor, but we need you to bring him to us. It's got to be a surprise. Jack was more than willing. He wanted to be a part of this lifestyle more than anything. So he agreed to do what they asked him to do, not knowing how serious it was. And that's how that goes. A lot of times we agree to things we don't know what's really going on. And so did Jack. This concludes this episode of Generation of Grit, a tale of turf and legacy. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.